this is one of our very first year of doing these green webinars, and this work grew out of our sense that the folks who do green team work in congregations. So Interfaith Power and Light has been working for years in the DC area and across the state of Maryland to support people in their congregations who are going green and responding to climate change. But we've increasingly felt like it's really those folks inside congregations who are the green team leaders that are really the rock stars of what we do. And these webinars grew out of a desire to spend this whole year really supporting and equipping those folks. We know that sometimes people who are doing green work in their congregations feel like the green sheep in their communities, and we are committed to Interfaith Power and Light being a place where those green sheep can flock together and support each other. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it's always helpful to be able to envision people's faces. So I wanted to just describe the IPL team, the IPL staff. I'm Joelle, second from right there in the photo, and Karen, who you heard from earlier, is second from left. This is a team of folks who have implemented all of the programs that we are calling together the Year of the Green Sheep. I'll talk a little bit about our agenda for tonight. So each of these gatherings is a chance to focus on something specific, but also to just be in community together. We'll open with a reflection to kind of set our intention for the evening. We'll spend most of the time hearing presentations from folks who have really extraordinary resources to share with us about how to green the grounds of our congregations and think about the grounds as sacred space. During that time, you may want to frantically take notes. And I want to remind you that Karen earlier today sent everyone an attachment with resources. The speakers each already have submitted the resources they're going to mention, especially any websites. And we also have some additional resources in this topic. We intentionally have sent out that resource document as a doc, in other words, as a Word document that you can open and edit and type on, so that you can be listening and typing right into the notes as you listen without having to frantically try and get down every website or every organization mentioned, because all of those resources have been pre-put on the document. So take a look at the email Karen sent earlier today if you don't have that resource document open in front of you as you're listening. We'll have some Q&A time, some time to ask each of our speakers questions. And throughout the evening, if you have a question for Karen, in other words, for the moderator specifically, not a chat for everyone, you'll note that in the top left-hand corner of your screen it should say Q&A with a little question mark. And you can click on that and type, even if the line is muted, to ask your private questions to the moderator. And then at the end, we'll have a chance to kind of share updates and things in our community and some ideas of what's coming up for IPL. I think with that, I will invite Tim to open our time together with a reflection.
Thank you, Joelle. So I spent the past week in northwestern Ontario, perched in a rustic log cabin on a series of lakes and rivers that run for miles, surrounded by cedar and oak trees. It is somewhere my family goes often, and I occupied my time fishing, reading, and just generally catching my breath. It is for me a deeply spiritual place, one where I feel at home, both with myself and with the earth. Living in D.C., it is quite amazing to spend some time where the only structures surrounding you have been built by beavers. Trout, walleye, and perch spawn in the rivers and fill the lakes. Moose, bear, and deer move throughout the forest, eating foliage and waiting for spring. And while logging has scarred the wider region, the immediate area surrounding Wine Lake remains pristine. So preparing for this meditation, my thoughts turn to those who first inhabited the land, remain there today, and have preserved it for so many generations. The placekeepers of this place are the Wabaskang First Nation of the Ojibwe tribe, part of the Anishinaabe language family. And while I make no claim to being an expert on indigenous religious practice, I can't help but think that there's a connection between their traditional teaching and ceremonies and the ways that they have preserved this beautiful place that I hold so dear. Their stories of the Creator and practices such as the sun dance and sweat lodge bring them into a close and abiding relationship with creation. The Anishinaabe writer Leanne Simpson describes how her tribe's traditions create an ecology of intimacy that leads to a series of radiating responsibilities encompassing both the water and the land. This is something my Christian tradition can deeply learn from. As we turn to the topic of greening our sacred grounds, I just want to pose a few simple questions for us to ponder in the days and weeks ahead. What stories and practices will we lift up from our traditions and our efforts to preserve our special places? And what can we learn from friends of other faiths and ancient ways that will in turn inform our own placekeeping? Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. So bearing that in mind and taking a deep breath, we're going to hear from a series of folks who, in each in different ways, can talk about the opportunities that the grounds of our congregations present to be green and be mindful of the sacred. So our first speaker is Kelly Vaughn James from the Ark Church in Baltimore.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Kelly Vaughn James. I'm the project coordinator for Ark Church. A little history about our church. We have been in existence for 79 years. We've only had two pastors in our entire existence. One was our founder, which was Pastor Matthew Marcus, and his successor, our current pastor, Dr. J.L. Carter. The nonprofit arm of Ark Church is LAM Incorporated. LAM was put in place in October of 1995 to address the needs of the community and to be a great presence in the immediate area surrounding our church. It's through LAM Incorporated that we seek to meet the needs of the community. One need that we immediately recognize in our community is our food environment. There was a study conducted by Baltimore Food Policy Initiative and the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future. It was published in 2012, and it showed that 20% of Baltimore City is what they call a food desert. Well, then the question is, what is a food desert? And the study described a food desert to be a neighborhood that is more than, the residents live more than a fourth of a mile away from a supermarket. The median income tends to be at or below 185% of the poverty level. More than 40% of those households will not have a vehicle, and the nearby stores carry a majority of food that would be considered to be unhealthy. An example of this would be a corner store that sells snacks, not a lot of produce, or a cut rate that sells a lot of processed meats. As our church recognized this need in our community, we started to look for ways to help. One immediate remedy to that situation is and has been our food pantry. Our food pantry is open twice a month with minimal requirements to those who come to get food items, meaning that really the only requirement is that they have a Maryland State ID. Although our food pantry has been a tremendous help, it did not meet the need to provide fresh food to our community. Our church does own a big property that we use to distribute free food and host events such as carnivals. We also distribute, we have a free clothes closet on that property as well. We store our lawn equipment there and various other items. So imagine, if you will, a gated property with 2 buildings inside. It's 3 acres, and the rest of it surrounding the buildings is just blank space that can be used for pretty much anything. The property was not at that time in use much, and it was rarely used on a consistent basis. I would say about once a week. We had traveled outside of Maryland, and we saw hoop houses in other states that were just sitting in the middle of the city. And we wondered then, how were they growing anything in the city at those hoop houses? And the idea was brought up to bring to our property to grow fresh produce. Of course, we did not have any farming expertise, and we would not know how to build a hoop farm. But we saw it and we desired to have it. We did some research, and we found an investment company that had been successful in starting hoop houses in inner cities. We contacted the investor and set up a meeting. The investor initially funded the project, and we were able to build the hoop houses that we currently have. Shortly after the hoop houses were built, we sought to find a way for our congregation to get involved with the hoop houses outside of cultivating dirt, planting seeds, which they did not initially show a lot of interest in. One of our farm managers gave us a great idea to have our congregation contribute their trash items so that we could cut the cost of having to buy fertilizer and such, and we started to build compost. As you can imagine, the trash began to pour in from the congregation. We had more compost than we knew to do with. But it was a great initial way to involve the congregation. After our first successful year, we were devastated when our hoop farms were severely damaged by Hurricane Sandy. The cost needed for repairs and new equipment was too much for the church to handle, especially with the church having its own list of repairs caused by the storm, including a new $50,000 roof needed for our actual church building. And so priorities were there, and the hoop houses sat for a while in disrepair due to lack of funding and overall lack of excitement and expertise. It felt like a lot of work had been done for no reason and taken down by the storm. Well, a few months down the road, we were contacted by the good people of Real Food Farm. They asked what we planned to do with the hoop houses that were in disrepair and inquired as to why they weren't operating. We sat down and met with Real Food Farm and formed a partnership. From that meeting, we decided that it would be great to let Real Food Farm manage our hoop houses, run them on a consistent basis. This cuts a lot of the cost of the materials that we needed to rebuild the hoop farms, because they would do that and also keep the farms up. This option has given us everything that we initially wanted for our community. The community now has access to fresh grown produce on a consistent basis. We are using our property that was once vacant or not being used as much on a consistent basis. And we are able to host educational trips from area schools so that children can learn about farming and can also taste fresh food and have a desire to eat it on an ongoing basis. I should also add that Real Food Farm has made its mobile market available to those in our community. The mobile market will pull up in neighborhoods that don't have access to fresh food, and they can purchase fresh food right off the truck. And they also accept SNAP benefits and EBT from that truck. For us, this was a great way to green our congregation's ground. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I look forward to the rest of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Kelly. That's an awesome story. Our next speaker will be Bonnie Sorak, who's going to talk about some of the programs offered by Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Sorak. I'm the Congregational Outreach Coordinator for IPC, which is the Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. We're dedicated to educating, supporting, and motivating people and communities of faith in the Chesapeake watershed to care for the earth and all its inhabitants, beginning with their own home, the Chesapeake Bay watershed. IPC envisions a time when faith communities throughout the Chesapeake region will have a deep appreciation of the sanctity of earth and will care and advocate for it through their words and actions. IPC plays a connecting role between the faith community and the organizations working to restore the Chesapeake Bay. Often people confuse IPC with IPL, our wonderful host today. So I usually draw the distinction that IPL tends to be more of a focus on energy issues and on climate change initiatives, where IPC's focus is on Chesapeake Bay restoration. In addition to working part-time for IPC, I'm also a member of the Columbia Jewish Congregation in Columbia, Maryland. I was the founding co-chairperson of our congregation's Green Team and have functioned in this capacity for 8 years. Our congregation meets at the Oakland Mills Interfaith Center, sharing space with 5 or so other mixed denominational congregations. So I have quite a bit of experience working within communities to try to get goals accomplished. One of those green sheep out there. Next slide. So water is sacred. Water connects us to each other. How we treat our water is a reflection of our love and respect for God and others. We have a unique connection to those that share in our watershed. Looking at a map, you can see how water flows. How we treat our sacred water shows how we love and respect God's creation and each other. Next slide. So lots of people ask the question all the time, so what is the state of the Bay? CBF is the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and people are very familiar. Every year they put out a report card. So the short story is the Bay is improving, but very slowly. There are mixed indicators. Bay grass has expanded last year, which is a good thing, but the crab population has taken a downturn. That's a bad thing. There are still large dead zones where the water has a lack of oxygen, so it can't support life. There are large algae blooms that thrive on the high nutrients and drown out other life. And every summer we all hear about, oh, you can't swim at this beach or that beach because there are unsafe swim zones. Next slide. Whoops. My slides disappeared, so you guys keep going. I guess you can see it. Yes?
Yep, we can see it.
You can see it. Okay, so I'm I'm continuing on without slides. So, and this page you can see where some of us are able to enjoy in the summertime in order to cool off local pools, or to go to public. People gravitate to local watering holes and streams to enjoy nature. Other people go to have access to good, clean food supplies in local markets, or we go to jobs in offices where our watershed doesn't seem all that relevant. You go to work and you don't really think about that. But some people fish for pleasure or for sport, but for others it's a livelihood or it's actual sustenance. People are playing, fishing, and eating from unsafe waters. So really, the watershed issue is a social justice issue. Next slide. I guess maybe you should tell me when you're there. So what is polluted stormwater runoff? So this slide shows how when first it rains, you can kind of see the shimmer there on the pavement, and that's oil or other pollutants. And the pollutants rush with the water down to the storm drains, and those storm drains, you can see there all the debris that comes with the water, and then ultimately it flows out from those storm drains to our streams, rivers, and they eventually lead to the Chesapeake Bay. What is an impervious surface? Let's talk about that a little bit. So an impervious surface is any man-made roof, parking lot, roads, anything like sidewalks, all of that's impervious. So what you're looking at now is a picture of what happens with just 1 inch of rainfall. So you can imagine the force and the power that just an inch of rainfall causes within our drainage system. And most of that is, it goes to the bay all untreated, full of chemicals and pollutants. Stormwater is not a joke. For those of you in the Baltimore area, you might have seen the video footage of the big rainstorm we had about 2 weeks ago where a whole street collapsed because of the stormwater. So this is what's left after a rainstorm. So we should all take a moment and think about what are we really doing with the water in our sacred water in our lives. Next slide. So our watershed is huge. The Chesapeake watershed starts in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and extends 64,000 square miles all the way down to the Chesapeake Bay. Next slide. So polluted runoff is the only source of water pollution that is actually increasing. What are we leaving for our future generations? Okay, next slide. All right, so enough gloom and doom. Let's talk about what some solutions are. So first off, as congregations, as property owners, there are things that we can do to offset the impact of the impervious surfaces on our grounds, which are, in general, at a congregation, you're usually talking about a large roof, lots of times a large parking lot, the sidewalks around your congregation. Those are generally where the runoff comes from. So this is a picture of a rain garden, and in any case, any one of these practices, rain gardens, green roofs, rain barrels, they're all designed to take that stormwater that's rushing really quickly and to just slow it down and return it to how nature and God intended the rainwater to be dealt with, which is slowly where it seeps into the ground and is filtered by the natural resources surrounding it. So in this picture you see at St. Martin's Lutheran Church, they put in this rain garden, and the rain garden slowly releases the water. Those plants that you see are chosen. They're native plants that are resilient and are suited to absorb standing water. And there's layers underneath that you can't see that are designed to slowly filter the pollutants. Other things to consider that you can do other than these practices also include decreasing the pollution that ends up in the water. So if your groundskeepers are fertilizing to make the lawn green at your church, well, maybe reconsider that. Do you really need to have a green lawn? Because all of that fertilizer ends up in the bay. And pesticides, the same thing. Instead of spraying to get rid of bugs that may not really be causing you any problems, do you really need to do that? Those pesticides end up in the bay. And then the last thing there about tidy housekeeping, if you're having a church picnic or something outside, make sure that there's people that are really in charge and are acting as stewards to make sure the plates and the knives and the the napkins and the plastic bags don't fly away, because that's going to ultimately end up in a stream in the waterways. Okay, next slide. So as individual property owners, because we also not only want to invigorate the congregations as a whole, we want people to take practices back to their own properties. And one of the simplest things they can do is plant a tree. Trees are, in general, healing to the land, the air, and the water. So trees filter pollution, they absorb groundwater, they prevent soil erosion. So we just ask the question, just think about, have you ever seen flooding in an undisturbed forest? No, because they're designed by God and they naturally absorb the water. Okay, next slide. But congregations are community leaders, and what we look to our congregations is to work to educate others. What you see here is an example of storm drain stenciling, just to get people thinking, where does that water go? We just think it just disappears. What happens to that water? So this brings attention to that the water is going to end up back in the bay. We can also arrange for speakers to come and speak about the topic. Ask your pastor to have their sermon be about stormwater and the sacredness of water, and that we all share our water together. Then there's legislative engagement to work together to back legislation like the new stormwater runoff fee, to say that it's something that we do support because we realize that this is a problem. And then to work cross-denominationally with congregations within your area that share your watershed to do cleanup, stream cleanups and things like that, so that we pool our resources together and work not only within our congregation but reach out to other congregations as well. Next slide. One program that IPC runs is called the 10,000 Trees Program, where we provide free trees to congregations in our watershed-wide area. We work with you to come up with a professional planting plan and work with your congregation to envision what they want to do. Then on planting day, you provide the volunteers, we provide the materials and a crew leader. We offer workshops to do educational programs and spiritual workshops for your congregants, to work with your youth group, whatever works within your congregation, and contextualize that in a way that makes everyone more aware that we're all called to care for creation. My counterpart, Kolya, is the contact for the 10,000 Trees program. So if you're in our watershed, this program is available to you. Next slide. And then stormwater management. If you happen to be in either Baltimore or Anne Arundel counties, there are two programs available to provide that ultimately provides grant money to help install stormwater mitigation projects like the rain gardens and rain barrels and bioretention fields. In Baltimore, the program that I'm mostly responsible for is called Blue Water Congregations. And over the next 3 years, we're tasked to work with 84 congregations altogether to have water audits done where an expert will come out, look at your grounds, look at your roofs, figure out how much stormwater you're generating, and then come up with a plan for best practices to install. They make the recommendation about the rain gardens, rain barrels, cisterns, pulling up pavement. A lot of congregations have parking lots that get used maybe once a week, or they're just left most of the time, and you have this great big parking lot for the high traffic times, and then that parking lot is making stormwater for the rest, for the rest of the time. So maybe consider pulling up some of that pavement and putting down permeable pavement so that cars can still park there, but the rainwater can get through. So the Blue Water Congregations works with the congregations. Our job is to work with 24 of those 84 to do visioning work, not only related to stormwater, but also to other sustainability issues, kind of like how the previous presenter was talking about, that they really wanted to address the food issue, is to work with congregations to figure out where their passions lie and point them in a direction so that they can be doing the projects that will be most meaningful for them, including stormwater mitigation. And Riverwise is the same sort of program in Anne Arundel County. And I would be the contact person if you're interested in getting involved in any of those. Okay. Also, just here, I'd also like to just point out that if you're not in those two areas, municipalities are required by the EPA to meet certain standards. So, and all municipalities can't necessarily meet that because they don't own enough property to do the stormwater mitigation. So they're looking for organizations that they can partner with so they can actually do work on your property. So we can help you find out what's available in your area. Okay, and now next slide. So this is an example of how we worked as a connecting force with a congregation in Ricestown, in Baltimore. Hezekamuno, we met with them, did a visioning session. They decided that they wanted to, in conjunction with Blue Water Baltimore and the City of Baltimore, they decided that they wanted to do a large bioretention project. And ultimately, through working with them, they got a grant for $35,000 to put in a bioretention field that would cover 2 acres of stormwater runoff. Next slide. So imagine the potential. So there are 5,000 places of worship in Maryland. So in our whole watershed from Pennsylvania to Virginia, how many places of worship are there that we could be working with? We all need to work together. We need to start the ripple effect, and we're waiting to help and work with you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. Has Naomi joined the call? So while we're waiting for Naomi to join,
no, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, we actually have a few minutes. Maybe Bonnie, there were a few quick questions that came in for you, and I'm wondering if I can ask them now, and then we can do more questions at the end. So, some more just some practical ones. Like a lot of people on the call really like the drain stenciling idea, but we're curious who you need to get permission from to put a stencil on the sidewalk.
Oh, that's a great idea and a great question. And I'm so new at this, I don't know the answer, but I will find that out. So,
right. I know the Chesapeake Bay Foundation has been encouraging people to stencil like that since I was a kid growing up in Baltimore. So I'm guessing that Chesapeake Bay Foundation CVF would have experience with how to get that taken care of. And then some people asked questions about the trees program. First of all, does it serve only Maryland, or could you work in Northern Virginia?
Currently, it's just for Maryland. We're working on the possibility of expanding, but if you're in Virginia and need information, let Kolya know, and she will try to hook you up with someone else if she can't help.
Right. I know in DC proper, Casey Trees has lots of programs around tree planting. So if anyone's in DC and not in Maryland, I would suggest Casey Trees.
Right.
And then with the congregations, are you encouraging them only to plant trees on their own property or on other nearby area, like property that they might be able to plant?
Mostly we focus on the 10,000 trees program specifically on congregational grounds, but we encourage people to plant trees wherever they can,
cool.
And to plant trees on their own property, and to work with those kind of programs. Yeah.
I just wanted to reiterate what you said. I think it's important that despite the geographic focus of some of IPC's programs at the moment, many of the municipalities have some kind of stormwater or rainscapes program with real incentives. And then in addition, the Chesapeake Bay Trust is also very willing to give out grants for projects, I think, in the whole watershed. Which
actually, I think while I wasn't able to see the slides, I missed one. So there's grant money available through Chesapeake Trust, Chesapeake Alliance, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, National Fish and Wildlife. There's lots of different places that provide funding that even if you're not in one of these programs that I mentioned, we're happy to try to help you connect with something like that if we can't help you with it.
Yeah, and we've had the pleasure at IPL to write some recommendation letters for congregations applying for that kind of funding, and I'd be happy to put anyone in touch with, a good use of our Green Leaders listserv. If anyone wants, if anyone's not on it, feel free to let me know, and we'll put you on. Is to ask, who else has gotten funding, especially if you're in a particular region where you're not sure what programs are available to help out.
Right.
Cool. I think with that we will move on to Naomi's presentation, and then there will certainly be time to continue asking questions of all three speakers at the end, and everyone is welcome to continue sharing their thoughts spontaneously both in the chat window and the Q&A box. Naomi's going to talk about this a really wonderful partnership that actually IPL was honored to help develop with National Wildlife Federation called Sacred Grounds.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. I am sitting outside in a garden at the Hebrew Academy, so if you hear a lot of bird noise, bird chatter, let me know. That's my only competition here. Can you hear it okay?
We can hear you fine, and it's wonderful to hear the birds as well.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Joelle. I appreciate it. Thank you, Karen. And yes, we've started a new National Wildlife Federation under its Gardening for Wildlife program has started a new program for the faith community. It's called Sacred Grounds, and we've piloted it with 3 congregations in the Washington, D.C. area. It was funded and also important partners, the National Park Service, so we're really grateful to them. With these funds, we worked with these 3 congregations that are on the slide, the first slide, Shalom Reconstructionist Synagogue in Bethesda, Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, which is in Gaithersburg, both in Maryland, and East Washington Heights Baptist Church, which is in D.C. on the Anacostia side. So going to the next slide, we've started this program because there are many, many threats to wildlife here and elsewhere in the country. And in this region, the biggest threats are just habitat loss and fragmentation because of the great growth of our urban areas and suburban areas. And with that, obviously, brings a lot of pollution, air and water. And we know that there's also all kinds of issues related to that with agricultural use, also around the Chesapeake. Soil erosion, with intense floods we've been having. If you look at the creek, like my Sligo Creek where I live, it just turned brown instead of its sort of normal clear color. It just was very brown after the intensity of the floods. Invasive species, as people know, you walk around and it's just huge. They're taking over most of our native plants, and they're crowding them out. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the biggest issue, which exacerbates many of these issues, is climate change. And climate change is increasing the number of invasive species, it's increasing soil erosion, it's adding to air and water pollution, as well as issues like sea level rise. So that's really dramatically compounding this. And we feel that this program can help address all of these areas and give people something to do at home and on their congregation that actually starts to help with all of this. People think often living in an urban area, there's nothing you can do. It's always about buying some land far away, but there's very much things that we could do right in our own congregation grounds. And that, moving to the next slide, National Wildlife Federation has been doing this with its Certified Wildlife Habitat program for more than 40 years, and we've already certified over 150,000 homes, schools, businesses, places of worship, and 80 communities, which is basically 80 towns. And one of the phrases that some people use is gardening as if life depended on it, because it does. All of us. And I'm going to explain what you can do now on your congregation grounds, and as simple steps already to just certify your property if you're interested. And I hope you are. And then we'll talk to you a little bit more about the program, the Sacred Grounds, that's still in development, but hoping to go live this summer or early next fall. So if you want to do something on grounds, there's 4 main elements, 4 components of certification: food, water, cover, and places to raise young. The most important of these is this idea. People put up bird feeders because they want to supplement, provide some food for birds, but the best bird feeder you can possibly build is putting native plants back on the land and putting native plants in your garden, putting native plants on congregation site. And these are the ones that have adapted with the caterpillars and the birds and all the other parts of our ecosystem. And 90% of insects that eat plants can only eat the specific plants. And these are the ones that they've evolved with over time. So if you think bird feeding is good, it's all about planting native plants. And I'll show you some examples here. The next one is a black swallowtail on a thistle. Putting in thistle will help you a lot with butterflies. There's a professor at the University of Delaware, and we're working closely with him with the Forest Service in a partnership, and he has determined which are the best perennial plants you could put on your congregation or in your yard or at your school site that will help caterpillars the most. Now, caterpillars are important because they feed the birds. Something like a chickadee needs 400 insects a day when it's raising its young. 400 caterpillars a day. 400 caterpillars a day. So you want to provide bird feeders to planting native plants. You want to plant the plants that are best and produce the most best for caterpillars. And here's some examples on this slide. And where he's actually doing this is Professor Talon. He's doing this for county by county. He's already done some of it for the Mid-Atlantic, but he's actually doing it for the whole country. So in September, we're going to have an amazing database to help people, help your friends everywhere. And here's another example, Baltimore checker spot on viburnum. Baltimore checker spot is actually an endangered species in our area, but if we plant it enough, one of the most important plants is something called a white turtlehead, and that one is something we planted at Adopt Shalom, and that's one of their favorite plants. So this shows a picture on viburnum, but the truth is the other plant, white turtlehead, if you can plant those, and we planted enough of those in some kind of a corridor, the butterflies could actually start to no longer be endangered. So that's something we can directly make a difference for. And here's just another example. If you go to the next slide, whether you can see which are the woody plants or the trees. And look again, oak has 534 different kinds of caterpillars that are their host to. If you compare that to any non-native trees, you would be down to numbers like 1 or 2. Any single native tree you plant will all be good. You can see here that oak are actually one of the best. So if you were going to choose any tree, oak would be one of the best for that purpose. Going to the next slide. The other thing, besides providing native plants for their food, is it's critical that wildlife have water and some kind of standing water. And it doesn't have to be a fancy bird bath like that. It can be any kind of little bit of water. And it's very, very important to them. There's also all kinds of things you could do with the water by creating vernal pools for frogs and salamanders. And so there's many other things you can do with water. People worry that this will translate into more mosquitoes. All you have to do is dump it out every week and put it in fresh water. So if you're looking to add a bird bath, you just want to look for one that's easy to knock over and pull back up again type of thing. But this is very straightforward, but a critical element. And the last two are cover and places to raise young. Putting up birdhouses has helped recover the bluebirds. We're now hoping that people, especially congregations, will think about doing a bigger project for chimney swifts. Chimney swifts are they're relatively common, but they're on a steep decline. And they're the kind of bird, if we started to act now and made birdhouses for them all over the place, we could avoid them becoming endangered. Some other examples of local wildlife that you could help would be screech owls. You can put up a nest box for them. Baltimore oriole is actually in decline. I already talked about the Baltimore checker spot. I think most people know that monarch butterflies are in a lot of trouble. Planting milkweeds is really important. That's like the plant they need the most. Just something simple like a milkweed would make a big difference for them. And then box turtle. There's a lot of different things you can do to help box turtles too. We have a lot more information on our website on how to do this, and I would encourage you to go to that. Look up Gardening for Wildlife on National Wildlife Federation's website. Now I'm just going to quickly go through some of the congregations that we worked with and show you some pictures of what we did. This is the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church, which is on a very busy road in Gaithersburg. But they really took this project on. Here you can see a picture of 4 different pictures from them. The man in the top left is a man, David Davis, who took this on. He's doing a creation care story with a pre-K and a K program, and all the parents came along. And then on the right of that picture, they created a mud puddle, which is a little indentation in the ground which holds water, and that's what butterflies like. And so that's one way you can provide the water element. He created a mud puddle, and all the kids are taking a look. They also put up birdhouses, and you can see what's nice about doing this is, you don't just educate the young people, but because you're working with the young people, the adults come along, their parents, so you get 2 for 1 here. And then the bottom left is one of the things David Davis did was he gave them all he did a whole planting day with them, and he did an educational program, and then he gave them all a little plant holder and a little plant pot, and he gave them native plant seeds to take home and start their own native plant garden back home. It was a really nice idea. And going to the next picture, the next congregation that we worked with is East Washington Heights Baptist Church. if you go to the next picture, you can see Reverend Banks and his wife in the far right corner. And I know Reverend Banks is a very active member of Interfaith Power and Light, and he's wonderful. And they had a large lots of turf grass on the property, a large property, and they dug up one section of it, as you can see in the top picture here. They took the rototiller to it, and they took all that turf grass out, which has no value to wildlife, and they put in many different kinds of native plants. And at first the community was a little nervous. They said, oh, this isn't going to look nice. It's going to be just an unkempt kind of look, but in fact, they're very pleased with it already. They only put this in relatively recently, but the flowers look really pretty, and it's right at the entryway, and people are very happy with it, and they have plans to do much, much more on their congregation grounds. And the last congregation is Adat Shalom, where I'm a member, and that's me in there with that, holding on to that little boy, or he's holding on to me. And the person to the right is Rabbi Fred Dobbs, who's a leading environmentalist and is past co-chair of Interfaith Power and Light. And we had our second big planting day. The first time we planted 350 square feet. This time we planted over 1,000 square feet. And we're having a blessing ceremony and a dedication ceremony right before the planting. And Rabbi Fred is talking about the connection between the environment and our faith. And here's an example. We had 60 people come out. People were really excited about it. And 60 people come out. We needed that kind of help, and they were all helping with the planting day. This is the next picture. And on the far right, you can see that one of the girls was part of our service project with her school built a bat box. So that's another example of what you can do on your property. And going on to the next one, these are some examples of some of the flowers that we planted and trees specifically for certain wildlife that we're intending to get in at Adat Shalom. And then moving on, the last slide. This is a little sign I saw in a cute little garden in Delaware this summer, and I just thought it captures what our intention is here beautifully. So it just says, one is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. And this is about people have done much work to create their sacred space inside their buildings on congregations to make that sacred and do very special things from energy efficiency and other things to live up to creation care. But this is about taking it beyond the building and taking it outside. And we are looking forward to working with any congregation in this area that would like to be part of this. And we're going to launch the program and unveil it and work closely with Joelle and others to make this a reality sometime this summer or fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. So one of the questions that came in while you were speaking, and I think it's one that others might be interested in hearing the answer to, was about, so some of our congregations are in the suburbs and have lots of land, but some of them are very urban, basically surrounded by buildings on all sides with just a little patch of grass in front or back. And I was wondering, so one of the questions we got is there any value to planting native plants, any value for wildlife to planting native plants in a very urban setting with very limited land? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes. Well, actually, we just had there was a ribbon cutting ceremony right in downtown L and 19th Street in Farragut North area in downtown yesterday. And they created rain gardens. They're capturing some crazy amount, like 90% of the stormwater from an inch and a half of rain event. It's really amazing that they're going to capture and hold there. So that's amazing, but they decided to go beyond the rain garden part and actually create wildlife habitat too, and they planted things and they did other things that were important for wildlife. So that's about as congested as it gets in D.C. And the answer is yes, that studies have shown that even doing it in very dense urban areas, that there's some wildlife that you're helping. And it's, one of the things that we always forget is that it's not just about the birds or the other animals that are living there in the summer and raising their young, but we have huge numbers of migratory birds that come through, even into our cities, warblers and thrushes, tanagers, and they fly through, and they might only be there for a week, a few days, or a week or two period, as they're coming from like the Yucatan, going up to Maine or something. But when they stop wherever they are, they need to eat like crazy to get to to fuel up to their next spot. So you are providing wildlife habitat. I mean, sometimes you're encouraging birds that we don't, that are that are invasive species like house sparrows and things like that. But it's still worth doing. You do have value.
The other question we had was about whether you're aware of any funding out there that helps congregations do native plant gardening or wildlife gardening on their grounds.
Well, the big one, which is one of the things we learned, is Adat Shalom was able to do this 1,000 square feet plus through the like we were talking before, the Rainscapes program. I think this dual ability to deal with stormwater runoff, deal with pollution, and create wildlife habitat by planting native plants is a real winner, and that's something we're going to start encouraging more of to happen, and we're going to partner with Montgomery County. But basically, the Rainscapes program provided Adat Shalom $10,000 as a rebate. So congregations, where there are those financial incentives, congregations are eligible to get much, much more than a homeowner. So that's what's helping us pay for our program at Adat Shalom. And other than that, I think it's what you answered before, that there are Chesapeake Bay Trust and other places. But most of them are doing it coupled with stormwater, which is good, though. To do both is the best case scenario.
Right.
But and also you can get, let me just say, you can also get native plants at a discount sometimes if you go to a nursery and talk to them about that you're a congregation. You certainly don't have to pay taxes. And you can also, there's great native plant sales that you can get them cheaper than sometimes nurseries.
In a moment, we're going to open up the line and just see if people have questions for any of our three speakers. I just wanted to mention some additional resources that are listed on your resource document. We have a few speakers in our Speakers Bureau already that might be good resources for implementing some of these ideas. One is MJ Crom, who works for the Capital Area Food Bank and helps congregations in the DC metro area to do food gardening, and to especially if the hope is to donate that food to support those in need. We also have a fellow named Barry Chenkin in our Speakers Bureau who is Mr. Rain Barrel and knows everything about all the different brands and models of rain barrels, and can do workshops where he brings his truck full of rain barrels and can show you how to unhook your downspout and capture rainwater in a rain barrel on your congregational building. He can also sell people rain barrels to take home. And I know in the Baltimore area that Blue Water Baltimore is also a big help with rain barrels. And then a fellow named Peter Ensign on our Speakers Bureau is with an organization called DC Greenworks that helps with both rain barrels and green roofing in another technique for slowing down stormwater in the DC area. So, and finally, the Baltimore Food and Faith Project supports congregations in Baltimore and all of the surrounding counties with gardening. So there are a number of folks in our community that are already pretty expert on these areas, and in addition to those that we heard from tonight can be resources as you try to implement some of these ideas. The other thing we've heard from congregations is that master gardener programs, the master gardeners, to get their master gardener certification, need to do kind of a project in the community. And so sometimes if there's someone in your community who is becoming a master gardener, especially someone in your congregation, they might be able to help with gardening as their project that helps them earn the certification. So we're going to open it up and we're going to attempt to unmute the line.
You are now unmuted.
That works. So far, so good. So does anyone have questions for either of our three speakers? I'm curious to hear from Kelly about, over time, how gardening for food on the church property has changed or influenced the congregation itself. How has this become integrated into the life of the community?
That's a good question. We had to do some we had to really spend some time when we first introduced it because we are in the heart of the city. We are food desert all the way. So we did not realize that a lot of our congregation was not familiar with how to break down food from its original state. For instance, some of our congregation, believe it or not, hadn't really dealt with breaking down a head of lettuce, which seems crazy, but if you lived in this neighborhood all your life without transportation, you don't really get to see the unprocessed, uncut, unbagged vegetables. So what we did was we grew purple carrots, and we grew a lot of weird stuff, odd stuff that we knew they would not be familiar with at all. And we had a tasting where we had 2 chefs come in that cook organically, and they took them through every step. So from getting it from the ground to cleaning it thoroughly to preparing it, and then each member got to taste it. We did about 3 of those with all different vegetables that we grew. And the more that we went on, the more our congregation got interested in the farm. And that's when they began to bring in compost, and they would bring in shovels and supplies and all of that. So we're still trying to educate our people, but it's a process.
Thank you. We have another question. Well, I'm interested. Another question that I'll just put out there for continuing to think about is that obviously we've mentioned 3 different ways to think in a green way about the ground, at least 3, with our 3 different speakers. One is about growing food for the community or for the members of the community, for the human members of the community, and the other is about thinking in terms of being responsible stewards of the stormwater that runs off our property, and then thinking about supporting being hospitable to wildlife in the plants that we choose. And certainly those second 2 can coexist, as the speaker said, but it's interesting to think about how to balance food gardening with those other 2 goals, because I think all 3 can occur in the same space, but if there are ideas about how to balance those, I'll be interested. We also got a question from one of our listeners who said, how can we approach our church about influencing them to give up putting pesticides on the ground? And I know this can be a really tricky thing because in a lot of congregations, the grounds are kept by a company that's not the same as the staff of the congregation. So figuring out what chemicals they're putting on the grounds in the first place and then influencing them to change is difficult. I'll pass along one resource that's in our resource document, and then I'll be interested to hear what the speakers have to say. There's a wonderful organization based in this region, but national, called Beyond Pesticides, and they have all kinds of suggestions for finding groundskeeping firms that use fewer pesticides or use less toxic approaches. They also have signs that you can purchase that say pesticide-free lawn, and that's a way to kind of celebrate if you do have a pesticide-free lawn, and can also get some attention from neighbors who do not have a pesticide-free lawn. And so that if I were going to start that process, I would definitely recommend taking a look at their website, Beyond Pesticides, because it's a really fantastic resource. But other speakers' ideas about how to negotiate for fewer pesticides on your property.
Well, this is Naomi. I think one of the things is about planting native plants is that they're not pest proof, but they have evolved over time, and so they can often withstand those situations, just like they're also better under conditions of heavy flooding or conditions of drought. They're more attuned to the environment, the natural environment that they're in, and so that it's less maintenance overall than putting in plants from China or Brazil or Italy and having a lawn. So in general, you use less water, you do less mowing, and you don't need fertilizers, you don't need soil amendments, you don't need pesticides. I mean, there's really no need for pesticides. I mean, I'm not really sure why anybody would be using pesticides except because they think it looks beautiful, like it's a cosmetic thing in most congregations. And in Tacoma Park, where I live, they actually banned this past year, they banned cosmetic pesticide use. And the town looks beautiful. I don't know. That would be my response. There's really not much reason to need them.
And I would add to that, I understand the difficulties in dealing with boards of congregations that may not be like-minded. So it's really an educational process for whoever the green sheep are in the congregation to bring. They're probably not even questioning that to start with. So to bring to them, just ask the question, and why are we doing this, and do we have to keep doing this? And I'll chime in with Naomi as well, saying, why do we even have the lawn in the first place? Let's just get rid of that lawn and let's plant something else.
Any thoughts about balancing gardening with these other goals? Food gardening?
Well,
I was interested. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was interested in the water barreling for because we have the hoop farms and everything. So I was wondering how that works.
Water barreling?
Bonnie, tell us. Tell us a little bit more about how rain barrels work.
Yes.
Oh, barreling. Okay.
Yeah, water barreling. That's what I was saying.
So essentially, Naomi kind of described it a little bit, I think. And so when it rains, you get a lot of runoff from your roof. Is the main one. And so most places of worship will have gutters and downspouts, and basically you're capturing that water before it runs off into the ground and is running down. Usually they're directed to pavement or something so that the water is going away quickly. And the whole idea behind a rain barrel is instead of it going away, it gets captured in the rain barrel, and usually it's some sort of system set up where it then becomes a drip irrigation system, so that so the water is captured and then it's released slowly. And if it's attached to a rain garden or some other sort of garden area, that then the water is used within that garden. And sometimes it's used to water a food garden if there's one available, or other gardens that are there. So it's a matter of just capturing the water and keeping it from quickly going away.
So Kelly, if you look on, if you Google a little bit, you should be able to find pictures of this. But you're literally disconnecting the downspout before it reaches the ground, and placing a receptacle underneath it on the ground. And then there's usually an attachment to use the water.
Okay. Well, this is something that we had discussed before, and I did a little research into it, but when you asked that question, it finally clicked. This will be a great way to water our hoop houses that are here. The church owns so many properties, and if we just did this, then I wouldn't receive $2,000 water bills from the city, because we would be using what comes out of nature, putting it directly back into nature. So I'm glad I had this opportunity to learn a little more, and that's definitely something that I want to look into for our hoop houses.
And Kelly, because you're in Baltimore. Go ahead.
Yes, I was jumping all over this one. So Kelly, we need to talk too, because one of the impetuses for the Blue Water Congregations program is the new stormwater fee that everyone's being charged, including congregations. So in addition to you paying for your water, you're now paying a stormwater utility fee. So if you install rain barrels, and there's all kinds of complicated formulas as to how much stormwater you have to mitigate, but we can have a water audit done on your property, figure out how to get rain barrels and all that to serve what you're doing, and then you would get credit. You would be charged less of a fee because you install those, and we can help you get the grant money to do that. So, overall it would all work together.
Yes, I have been on the website. I have found my church where it is in the map and everything as you were talking, and I am definitely going to look into that probably next week because we have 40 properties. The church owns 40 properties. The other thing that we do is we provide cost-effective, affordable housing, pretty much.
Right.
And we have 40 properties, and there's no reason why we shouldn't take advantage of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the very first thing you should be doing is applying to have you qualify as a place of worship to automatically get a reduction of your fee, but you have to apply for it. And as of a few weeks ago, 2/3 of the congregations in Baltimore City had not yet applied for the reduction. So the very first thing we need to get you to do, yes, because you don't know. So that's part of my job is to make sure you learn about that. We get you your stormwater fee reduced right off the bat, and then we'll work with you to get projects in the ground that will reduce your runoff altogether.
Okay. So the kind of connections hearing on this call are very beautiful and inspiring. Thank you, everyone. I wanted to, somebody asked about water audits, and I'm pretty sure that was an IPC program with Blue Water Baltimore and is just in that region, but maybe you know of other ways to do a water audit on your property?
Oh, well, so the water audit that with Blue Water congregations is through Blue Water Baltimore, but we can find other organizations that do water audits in other areas. So yes, it's simply a matter of someone with that expertise coming and walking your grounds, seeing where your stormwater is created, runoff is created, and then making recommendations for best practices to reduce it. Ultimately, and there are people that are certified for that, and I can look into that for them in other areas.
Cool. And then we had a question that I'll take, which is about whether we can help churches that are and other congregations located in a particular Hunter Mill corridor in Oakton, Virginia, to work together and maybe think about their grounds as continuous, like creating continuous wildlife habitat and continuous, and we would love to do that. And Interfaith Power and Light has a pretty good database of the green sheep at every congregation we work with. So we are happy to help folks offline if they contact us to, figure out who we know already who cares about environmental issues at neighboring congregations.
Joelle, sorry, this is Naomi. I have to get off because I have to get my child here. But thank you for letting me join you tonight.
Thank you so much. It was great to have you.
And Naomi's contact information is in that resources document. So if anyone has more questions for how to make their congregation's grounds more wildlife friendly, just feel free to email her.
Any other questions? Well, this has been really inspiring for me just to see all the images of the way congregations are dedicating their grounds to kind of all these higher purposes. And I hope it's been inspiring for each of us to see what's possible and to start thinking about really thinking creatively about what our grounds can do. So please stay in touch with each other.
You are now muted.
If you are getting our emails, which I assume everyone is, but you are not yet on our Green Leaders listserv, which allows Green Team leaders to exchange information and ideas with each other locally, let us know. Email that email address you see right there, program@gwipl.org, to be added to our Green Leaders listserv, because it's a wonderful way to continue this conversation that we're having right now, albeit by email. So I just wanted to give everyone a heads up about one of the advocacy opportunities that is coming up. One of the things we do together as a community is speak out for environmental issues on a larger scale than just our own grounds or our own communities. And for the very first time, the EPA is about to propose limits on the climate pollution from the United States' single greatest source of the heat trap and climate pollution that's causing climate change, which is power plants, specifically coal-fired power plants. So starting June 2nd, we expect the EPA to issue these proposed rules. And in our experience, every fossil fuel company in the country that is not happy about there being limits on climate pollution will use that comment period, the public comment period, to let the EPA know that they don't want to see there be any limits on climate pollution. In addition, these particular rules are very significant, and we expect there may be attempts to interfere with the EPA in Congress. There also may be litigation where the companies will just sue the EPA to try to prevent these limits. So we really think there's an important opportunity for the faith community to speak out loudly and clearly during that comment period and say that we support there being some limits on climate pollution, especially from this industrial carbon pollution that's coming from these power plants. And there'll be different ways to do that. The way that is often the most compelling for people in religious communities is that we'll create faith postcards that are specifically for faith communities, and you can bring a stack of them with you to your congregation and, stand at a table after services and just invite the other people in your community to sign postcards to the EPA, and then you'll mail them back to us, and we'll deliver them all together with people of faith from around the region who are speaking out in support of limits on carbon pollution. There may also be hearings in this region, and if so, we will let you know how you can have a chance to speak out and testify. And then the other possibility is that particularly those folks from Virginia on the call, you may discover your senators we are concerned that both Virginia senators may not be as supportive of the rules as we hope. And if that comes to pass, there may be an opportunity to really have your, speak out to your senator and make sure, senators, and make sure that they are supportive or at least not interfering with the EPA's important work. So we just wanted to give everyone on the call a heads up about that as June 2nd approaches, so that you can give some thought to whether there's some way that your congregation would like to engage with this, because it's really a powerful and important opportunity for all of us who are concerned about what's happening to our climate.
Joelle, do you have any idea how long the comment period will last?
They're usually about 2 months, like 60 to 90 days. Sometimes with very important things, they extend them, or very controversial things. So, yeah, I'm guessing about 2 months. Because
it's just curious to me, because that's over the summer when things are like winding down for congregations. Like everyone kind of takes a break over the summer.
It's actually interesting. At IPL, we, because a lot of pastors go on vacation, that's when we get to come give guest sermons, and we get lots done in the summer in countries.
Right.
But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I do expect the comment period to take place over the summer, for better or worse.
Right.
Hopefully some of the polluters will also be on vacation. I think with that, I will thank everyone. Thank each of our speakers, but also everyone who asked good questions and just is part of our larger community. I find it so hopeful and encouraging to hear what people are doing in their communities and to know that we're kind of in this together. A couple other green sheep resources for you as a green leader, so you can plan ahead. Once a month, I go and sit myself at a cafe somewhere in our community and let green team leaders make appointments with me, 1 hour each, all day long. And we just do consultations personally with green team leaders about what are ideas and strategies for going green in their community. Our next Green Sheep office hours will be in Baltimore. This is the first time we've had Green Sheep office hours in Baltimore. So if you're a Baltimore area green team leader, you can email program@gwipl.org to sign up for a meeting slot with me. And I would love to have coffee with you and talk more about going green. And then our next webinar is going to focus on a topic that I know is of interest to many, many congregations in our community, which is how can we support solar power? Both how can we put up solar panels on our congregational facilities to generate energy from heaven, but also how can we work as communities of homeowners in our congregations. We're not all homeowners, but how can we work, how can those homeowners in our congregations work together to put up solar on their homes, maybe as a group? And so we're going to have a really fun and interesting webinar about where that's a very rapidly evolving and growing area. And so we're going to talk about some of the new programs that are out there and hear from congregations that have successfully done both congregational solar for their buildings and also facilitated group purchases of solar panels for homeowners. And we're just delighted to be working with you. It can sometimes feel like long, slow progress in our communities by ourselves, and so just being in touch with each other and knowing we're working together is really helpful for the journey. And with that, I will say thank you, and good night.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
You are now unmuted.